Hello, everyone. Today we are going to finish the new Jim Crow by reviewing the last chapter, chapter 6, which is entitled The Fire This Time. Also, we are going to create a working thesis statement and an outline for a possible summary essay about this particular chapter. Note that you can use these same types of principles to write about any of the other chapters, to summarize any of the other chapters. So let's begin. The Fire This Time. In this chapter, Michelle Alexander proposes solutions. She critiques problems regarding mobilizing to combat the problem of mass incarceration, and she also offers solutions. So we will begin with page 223. She argues here that a new civil rights movement cannot be organized around the relics of the past. I will read a bit. This is from page 223 in the new Jim Crow. And she states the following. Any racial justice movement to be successful must vigorously challenge the public consensus that underlies the prevailing system of control. Nooses, racial slurs, and overt bigotry are widely condemned by people across the political spectrum. They are understood to be remnants of the past, no longer reflective of the prevailing public consensus about race. Challenging these forms of racism is certainly necessary, as we must always remain vigilant, but it will do little to shake the foundations of the current system of control. The new caste system, unlike its predecessors, is officially colorblind. We must deal with it on its own terms. So here she's confronting the idea that some would argue, oh, we don't have racism anymore. You're being paranoid. We don't call people the N-word anymore. We don't have forced segregation. So that means there is no such thing as racism. Throughout the book, she has argued that the colorblind system immunizes charges against racism. Later on in this chapter, she is going to confront how we can deal with racism in a colorblind era. Now, page 224, she states that organizations, politicians are in denial about the system. And why are they in denial about the racism in the system? It is because these organizations and politicians are political, and they must take care of their own reputations. And unfortunately, in our system, there is no such thing as a good criminal. On page 227, she gives us some very interesting examples for how politicians and organizations work. in order to deny the severity of the problem. On page 227, she uses Rosa Parks as an example of how the ideal is chosen. So I'm going to summarize what she says on page 227. Many people simply do not know that Rosa Parks, the African American woman that is known as taking a stand against bus segregation in the South, many people do not know that she was not the first person to refuse to sit in the back of the bus. There were others, many others, who refused to sit in the back of the bus. You had two other very popular examples during this time period. One person, unfortunately, was not quote unquote a good example. Why? Because this person who refused to sit in the back of the bus was a pregnant teenager. And so organizations like the NAACP did not want to stand behind a pregnant African American teenager because they felt it was going to tarnish their reputation, and also that others in the grander community would not want to rally around this type of person. Rosa Parks, they thought, was a great example. Why? Note here, racism also had a part in this. Rosa Parks was a light-skinned mulatta, medium-sized woman, a civic and religious worker, quiet, unassuming, and pleasant in manner, right? And so this is an example of why many times organizations and also politicians don't want to stand behind controversial realities, right? And mass incarceration is extremely controversial. Politicians may fear, hey, if I stand against mass incarceration, my constituents will think I am soft on crime, and then I will not get elected again, right? So this is a big problem. This is a critique that she is making. On page 230, she also identifies how in African American communities, the economy has collapsed. And many times, African Americans, it is thought, cannot contribute to this new economy. Prisons are big business. And the problem with fighting against this big business is that the people of color are patsies in this big business system. And so the prisons have grown exponentially. They are a multi-billion-dollar industry in the United States. Some have coined the industry the prison industrial complex. And so fighting against this system takes a lot of effort, because corporations will spend a lot of money to keep themselves in place. Also, you can imagine that many towns rely on their prisons in order to survive. I can think of, for example, towns in California like Susanville, California, which houses a big prison. Tehachapi, California, houses another big prison. Soledad is another town where the prison is the staple of the town. Page 233, Michelle Alexander argues that in order to fight the problem of mass incarceration, we must stop the militarization of police in urban communities. I will read. Equally important, there must be a change within the culture of law enforcement. Black and brown people in ghetto communities must no longer be viewed as the designated enemy, and ghetto communities must no longer be treated like occupied zones. Law enforcement must adopt a compassionate, humane approach to the problems of the urban poor, an approach that goes beyond the rhetoric of community policing to a method of engagement that promotes trust, healing, and genuine partnership. Page 236. This is probably one of her more important areas where she guides solutions. She claims that in order to fight mass incarceration, we must discuss the racial caste system. This system, this system as it exists right now, is better designed to create crime, not to eradicate crime. So here she is saying that the system, as it has flourished, is actually creating criminality. I will read from page 236 now. The system is better designed to create crime and a perpetual class of people labeled criminals rather than to eliminate crime or reduce the number of criminals. Let's understand this concept, okay? Lawmakers create the laws. Now, in the 1980s and 1990s, lawmakers created laws that criminalized drugs. And therefore, if the drug war was mostly targeted to African American hoods and Latino barrios, then we must understand that these laws criminalized people that were living in those communities and that were simply possessing, or even in the worst case scenarios, dealing drugs. And that's what this system did. It created criminals. Page 238. Alexander claims that whites avoid race discussions because it makes them uncomfortable. Page 241, Alexander is totally against the myth of colorblindness. I will read from page 241 now. And this may be one of the most striking passages of the entire book. Page 241. The deeply flawed nature of colorblindness as a governing principle is evidenced by the fact that the public consensus supporting mass incarceration is officially colorblind. It purports to see black and brown men not as black and brown men, but simply as men, raceless men, who have failed miserably to play by the rules the rest of us follow quite naturally. The fact that so many black and brown men are rounded up for drug crimes that go largely ignored when committed by whites is unseen. Our collective color blindness prevents us from seeing this basic fact. Our blindness also prevents us from seeing the racial and structural divisions that persist in society. We have become blind, not so much to race, but to the existence of racial caste in America. So here, she is arguing that color blindness has made us intentionally ignorant of racism in the United States. She believes color blindness is an evil, and the way to eradicate the evil of color blindness is to critique color blindness and to have frank discussions regarding race, even though it makes us uncomfortable. Page 248, she says that mass incarceration depends for its legitimacy on the widespread belief that all those who appear trapped at the bottom actually chose their fate. This is a critique against ideal examples, such as, for example, LeBron James or ex-president Barack Obama or successful rapper Jay-Z, right? And she claims that these choice examples are flaws because they undermine reality for the majority of African Americans and Latinos. On page 258, she attempts to inspire a myriad of people to join together. The disabled community, the LGBTQ community, even poor whites must become part of the fight against mass incarceration, or else, she argues, a new caste system will emerge and we will be ignorant of that emergence. Okay, page 261. She ends the chapter and ends the book by quoting Baldwin, James Baldwin, the renowned author of the 20th century, who claimed that the innocence of Americans constitutes the crime. They, the innocent, do not know the problems of the African American community and do not want to know it. They want to remain innocent. Michelle Alexander says that we must cease fleeing from reality and begin to change it. To change it. I am going to shift now to discussing how could you write a summary essay about this particular chapter, about any of these chapters in the book. Okay, now, first of all, you must engage with the text itself. There is no substitute. You must read, annotate, make comments, write mini summaries, read again. Let the reading sit. Let your brain absorb the information. Go do something else. Go sleep on it. Then reread the text again. Make more notes. Dog ear your pages that you think hold important information. Annotate some more. Underline. Highlight the text. Okay? Then what you want to do is you want to write. You want to write what you think are important parts. The most important parts of the material. And in this case, it is the most important aspects of the chapter, The Fire This Time. So now that I have compiled all of the most important points, what I am going to try to do is I am connecting the themes inside of what I regard are the most important points. And I am going to present to you a working thesis about this particular chapter. In my working thesis, I must give the author's name, and also I must tell you what information she provides. I cannot give you my own opinion. Okay? I must remain neutral about the information. So here is my working thesis, and you will see it. It is on the screen if you are looking at the video. In Professor Michelle Alexander's The Fire This Time, she proposes that in order to eradicate the crisis of mass incarceration, grassroots people, organizations, and politicians must become conscious of the racist, caste, colorblind criminal justice system and fight together against the system. Now, in a summary essay, that will be my first sentence. I do not need an introduction. That is my first sentence of the essay, and then after that, I go into body paragraphs that support that thesis statement. And I have organized my body paragraphs in the following manner. If this were a 4 to 5 page essay, I can imagine 5 body paragraphs. And note here, I must give you the most important information. I am not going to be stuck on details. I am not going to give you my own opinion about the information. I am going to constantly give you author tags. I'm going to constantly reference Michelle Alexander. Michelle Alexander explains. Michelle Alexander argues. Michelle Alexander confronts. Okay? I'm going to constantly give you author tags so that I don't unknowingly start to give you my own opinion about the information, right? And I'm constantly reminding the reader that they are reading about someone else's ideas, not mine, not mine. Okay, now I am going to outline for you 5 body paragraphs. 5 body paragraphs. Body paragraph 1. I would focus on Alexander's ideas about denial about the racist colorblind system. Body paragraph 2. I would focus on Michelle Alexander explaining how prisons are big business. Body paragraph 3. I would illustrate how Michelle Alexander argues that in order to stop mass incarceration, we must stop the militarization of police in urban communities, in the hoods, in the barrios. Body paragraph 4. I would give my reader Alexander's proposal that in the United States, we must have frank discussions about race, and we must confront the myth of colorblindness. Body paragraph 5. Here I would explain Michelle Alexander's proposal for a solution. And her solution is that in order to eradicate mass incarceration, we must all join together. I would then offer a brief conclusion, and my conclusion would paraphrase my thesis statement, and also highlight the main points in each body paragraph. I could do this. I could condense the 40 pages in this chapter of this book. I could condense it into 4 pages of main points of my own essay. I hope this has helped, and I hope that you have enjoyed this lecture. Thank you. Have a great day. Goodbye.